Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So I'm kind of at an angle that I'm not normally at because of the glare, and I hope the audio on this turns out okay. I'm wearing my Bluetooth because the trucks on either side of me are idling, but I like to have my windows open because it's a very lovely day here in Central California. So I came down the mountain last night, or very early this morning, delivered my load in Tracy, California at the Safeway. Man, that was kind of an ordeal. The first place I went, they said, no, you're at the wrong gate. I'm like, okay, so I go to the other gate. Now I knew there were two gates. I get to the other gate, I go to check in, the girl's like, yeah, you're supposed to be at the other gate because you have candy, which of course I knew I had candy. But interestingly, they got me in and out of there in 2 hours, and I didn't even have to pay any lumper fees, even though they have lumpers. So win for the good guys, I guess. So I want to talk about three things really today. We'll do a little bit of history, then we'll do a little bit on finance. It's sort of related to a little bit of the history. Then I want to talk about some of the notions about how, you know, we here at Prime get loads, etc. Because, and I'm going to reference a video that Richie Rich did, and if you haven't checked out his channel, check it out. Trucker Richie Rich. He does some good stuff. The dude's a straight shooter. He's like me, he's not a spring chicken, so he's got some life experience in different careers, and you know, he keeps it real. He's like, he's willing to share some of the pitfalls that he's fallen prey to and some of the mistakes he's made. And you know, if you can't learn from other people's mistakes, man, you're just it's tough sledding. You got to pay attention to, you know, if you see one guy walking in front of you and he falls in a hole, if you fall in that hole too, then, you know, shame on you. So check out Richie Rich. Okay, so today in history, by the way, it's February 8th. I said yesterday it was January 7th. It wasn't. It was January, or excuse me, it was February 7th. Today's February 8th. So a few interesting things happened today in history. And you know, there's a saying that, you know, history repeats itself. If you're a little more erudite, you might say the past is prologue. But in 1904, in Port Arthur, which was in China at the time, and I think Port Arthur became Shanghai. I'd have to check on that, which is now not Shanghai anymore. But anyway, in Port Arthur, the Japanese launched a surprise torpedo attack, 1904, surprise torpedo attack against the Russian Navy. And that was the beginning of the Russo-Japanese War. The Japanese actually won that war. But surprise torpedo attack should not sound unfamiliar to students of American history, because that was essentially what happened at Pearl Harbor. Surprise attack, and they used torpedoes, and in fact they used torpedoes that were thought to not be able to be used in water as shallow as Pearl Harbor. So there's that in 1904, a harbinger of what would happen in December of 1941. On this day in 1968, in Orangeburg, South Carolina, several black students were killed while protesting that the only bowling alley in Orangeburg, and these were college students from the local college, the only bowling alley in Orangeburg was segregated. They were killed by police. And that was, you know, there were several black colleges that had students killed during the Civil Rights era. And then on this day in 1971, the NASDAQ went online, basically, was started. And so NASDAQ is NASDAQ, right? And that stands for the National Association of Securities Dealers Automatic Quotation System. And the reason I bring that up is I was talking to somebody about the markets today, and I had mentioned the markets yesterday. And I wanted to, and I apologize, I can't remember who it was, but somebody pointed out some stuff that was interesting about Tyson. And in a comment, and you could probably read it on yesterday's video, but they said, hey, you know, Tyson stock is down like, I think they said 19% in the last maybe 5 years. And they pointed out that, you know, within 20 years, we're going to be transitioned to all vegetable-based proteins. And then within 50 years, we'll just take a pill, kind of like Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory. We'll just take a pill and it'll tell our brain we're full, and that's how we'll nourish ourselves. So I think those are all like interesting and valid points, right? You know, the numbers are what the numbers are. But what I did is I looked at the S&P 500 over the past, you know, like little bit, and it's down. The broader markets are down over the past few years. But here's the interesting thing that I think to kind of maybe amplify the comment, or at least, you know, throw another idea out there. And by the way, I don't own Tyson stock. I just bring up certain stocks. I've talked about McDonald's and I talked about Tyson. So two ends of the food chain, if you will, right? Consumer food at McDonald's and consumer food at Tyson, but also a producer, if you will. But one thing that I think is interesting, and you're seeing it in a couple of different industries. So some of these plant-based meat companies are struggling because plant-based meat, at least right now, is more expensive than meat, for lack of a better term. That's the first thing. So these startups are struggling. And it's also true that many EV companies are struggling. Even companies that have vehicles on the street, like Rivian. Rivian laid off or got rid of a bunch of upper management, you know, recently. And so I kind of was like comparing the two, right? Emerging technology, but a technology that's capital intensive, right? Like EVs are capital intensive, right? That's a big thing to make and get in the market. Tesla has been successful, but that's in large part because the guy that started the company was already insanely rich. And, you know, he was also a proven businessman because he's the guy that did PayPal, right? Like, he's kind of a visionary. But here's the interesting thing. I think that the market is eventually going to have lots and lots of EVs. All cars are going to be electric. But I don't think it's coming from some of these smaller outfits. I think it's going to be GM, Ford, you know, Toyota, maybe the Renault group. But it's going to be companies that have the bandwidth, have the manufacturing capacity, but also have a butt ton of money and have been around for years. And I think that's also going to be true in the vegetable-based protein market. I would be shocked if Tyson and other large food-producing companies aren't already, you know, figuring this stuff out. And it may be that they're the ones that bring it to the masses in a big way. Because let's be honest, you know, selling Teslas to, you know, rich people that live in California and selling them vegetable-based, you know, chicken patties, you know, that's not enough to sustain most businesses. Now, I know Tesla's all over the country, but you understand my point. And so my point about Tyson is they're a huge player in that industry. It would not shock me that they start bringing stuff to market. And also Tyson has so many brands under their umbrella that I don't know that they're already not doing it. And so they're going to take it. They're a food producer. They feed people, right? They feed people, consumer markets and commercial markets. They're going to continue to do that. They're going to figure out, I mean, you know, I'm sure they've already done lots of innovation. So I just share that with you because you gotta, when you're looking at any of this stuff, you gotta say, okay, who's going to have the ability to get all this stuff to market? There are always first adopters. I mean, you've seen a DeLorean driving down the road, haven't you? I have. I mean, I don't see it very much anymore, but I did when I was younger. You know, Back to the Future. I mean, that everybody knew it. That everybody knows what that car is. Huge brand recognition. Where'd it go? Not really anywhere. I mean, they're valuable, I guess, but they only made a few of them, right? So that's what you got to look at when you're trying. If you're looking at, you know, stocks to buy, you can take a flyer on some startup company, but a lot of times it's gonna, you know, you're just gonna end up with nothing but some memories. So let's talk about Prime for a second. So Richie Rich was doing a video about basically a bad lease deal that he was in, associated with USA Truck or Trucking. And you know, he shared kind of what his dream was. You know, he wanted to go out and run on his own. He wanted to, you know, see if he could gross about 10 grand a week, have a load board that he could pick from, pick the best loads, all this, right? It didn't work out the way he had planned. But that doesn't mean he had a bad plan. It just means it didn't work out. Because, you know, everybody knows the Mike Tyson quote that everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's kind of true. But it's also kind of true that, you know, the failure to plan means you plan to fail. And people that make plans are more able to alter course than people that don't do anything and don't plan anything. And let me give you an example. If I said, hey, I want a base jump off of El Capitan, okay, Yosemite's just, you know, a couple hundred miles that way, or maybe not even that far, right? But if I just walk to Yosemite and jump off El Capitan, I'm probably not going to survive it. In other words, you could say you want to do something, but if I don't plan, right, if I don't have a parachute, if I don't have training, if I don't know what the F I'm doing, right, then, and I don't pay attention to the weather, the winds, all that stuff, you know, I'm looking at a bad outcome. But if I plan for all that, then when I get there, if I'm like, okay, this is a go or a no-go, I've thought everything through. It doesn't mean I'm going to actually be able to base jump off of El Cap, but at least I planned it out. And that's what Rich did, but it didn't work out. And the video is great because he shares a lot of stuff. But somebody commented, oh, well, you know, because he was talking about the brokerage and he was talking about how, you know, they're holding back money, holding back fuel surcharge, etc. And, you know, I can't really comment on that because I never saw the numbers. I did see the demand that they made on him to pay back money on this lease truck and stuff, which is kind of no bueno. You know, that's one thing that leasing at Prime gives you is you could just turn it in. Now, if you're negative, they're still going to want that money. But if you're like clean, right? You're walking away. You don't owe them any money. You don't owe them any obligation. But somebody said, and his like handle, whatever you want to call it, is Taco Trucks or Tim's Tacos or something like that. But anyway, he says he watches my channel when he's bored. I was like, well, okay, thanks, man. I don't care if it puts you to sleep, man, if it, whatever works for you. But he said, oh, well, that's how Prime does things. And I'm like, no, not really, okay? And I think there's this concept that Prime, and look, there are a lot of people that don't like prime for whatever reason. I think part of the reason, and I'm not saying it's this guy, I think there are people that want to be at prime and have been rejected by prime. And that gets them being prime haters. I think there are people that have been at prime that were shown the door. That gets people being prime haters. And I think there are also people that were at prime, weren't successful at leasing, and were bleeding money and making nothing, and then they were like, okay, it's a racket. I can't, you couldn't make any money at it, so it's got to be a racket. So I don't know if this person falls into any of those categories, but the idea that prime's brokerage is taking a cut of the line haul before they give it to prime operations like reefer division, and that you're somehow, that me as a driver, if the load is brokered, I'm somehow getting cheated, is just really misinformation, right? It's twisting what's really going on. And let me explain. So I get 72% of line haul, just like everybody else in the reefer division. And I've explained this before, but there's this thing in the law called the bargain for exchange. It's a principle in contract law. So let me give you an example. I got a load, I got a pre-plan today, and they said, this load is going to pay $2,960. Here's where it picks up. Here's where it drops off. Here are the dates. Here's the mileage, etc. Right? So at that point, regardless of who else has made money on that load, regardless of the 28% that I'm giving up, regardless of whether this load came through brokerage, although I'm pretty sure it didn't because it's Shaw, and we run a lot of stuff for Shaw, and I'll get to the contracts in a second. But regardless of where this came, I looked at it, me, and I said, that $2,960 load going up to Portland is worth it to me, right? I can make some money on that. It doesn't matter if Shaw was like, oh yeah, we'll give Prime $10,000. It doesn't matter if Prime didn't share that other $7 grand with me, right? Because that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for the bargain for exchange. In other words, they present something to me and I say yes or no, right? And that's what I said in my original response to his post. Well, just turn the load down if you don't like something. And to illustrate this, I want to just share a quick real estate story, even though I'm not a huge fan of, I don't look at real estate really as an investment, but my friend Lyle, he has a different opinion, although my wife and I do have some rental property. But I bought a house in Mesa, Arizona in 2004, and we paid $267,000 for it, okay? A year later, my company closed and I put the house on the market. Now it's 2005. By the way, the market peaked in Arizona in July of 2005. This is around April or May. My realtor says, she sits at our dining room table and she says, I'm gonna list your property for $430,000. Mind you, a year earlier, $267 is what we bought it for. And I looked at her and I said, we knew her, we went to church with her. I said, Kasha, I said, I think you're crazy. And she goes, wait and see. And you know what? She was right. We got an offer, I mean, like 2-3 days for $415, which we did take, right? So in 1 year, went from $267 to $415. But guess what? The guy that bought the house, he didn't come to me and say, hey bro, you only paid $267 for this. I think you're ripping me off, right? He didn't say that. What he did is sign the papers. Why? It's the bargain for exchange. He wanted, and this is the like meta part of this. He wanted my house at least more, some percentage more, than he wanted $415,000. I wanted $415,000, at least some tiny percentage more than I wanted that house. That's the bargain for exchange. So getting back to Prime. Prime said, hey, we'll pay you $29.60 for this. I could have said, what the hell? This guy, I think he's testing his, like, I don't know what he's doing. Anyway, so that's the bargain for exchange. But the other thing that goes on at Prime that doesn't go on at a lot of these companies is Prime has contract cargo to haul, right? Prime has contracts with Tyson. I mean, you know, all of us kind of know who they have contracts with, right? They're a huge player in the market, right? So we have contracts with Tyson, JBS, Anheuser-Busch, Shaw Flooring, dry van load, but anyway, you get my point, right? We have contracts with dozens and dozens of companies, right? We're always at their facilities. Smithfield, there's probably 500 trailers that say Prime on them at Smithfield facilities as I speak, right? We have contracts. So I don't care where the load comes from. I don't care who made money on it, right? It's really not my business, right? All that's my business is, does Terry's truck make money hauling this load? That's my only inquiry. And there are people out there, and I get it, right? Fuel's gotten expensive. And by the way, you know, Prime is pretty upfront about the fuel surcharge. They say, this is what the fuel surcharge is this week. Now, if they say, hey, we're paying you 40 cents a mile fuel surcharge. If I add up the miles on the loaded portion, not the deadhead, right? The loaded portion. And and you know, I divide that fuel surcharge by 40 cents and it equals the loaded miles, then I know I'm getting what they said I was getting. Now, if they charge the customer 60 cents, I don't care, right? That's not my business. It doesn't matter. You know, the guy who bought my house in Mesa, I mean, and he could clearly find out because it's public record, right? But it's none of his business how much I paid for it. Do you want the house or not? Here's what you got to give me. Same thing with these loads. I don't care what broker, I don't care. I don't care if Robert Lowe's like, you know, Terry hauled that load and he did it for $2,960, but dude, I pocketed $5 from that load. I don't care. Enjoy it, Mr. Lowe. Go on vacation, you know? I mean, seriously, that's how business works. If you want the 5,000, then you start your own giant ass trucking company. And you know, that's the other thing about these giant ass trucking companies. Prime didn't start with 7,800 tractors and, you know, like almost 14,000 trailers. They started with one truck, you know, but it took 50 years. So you know what? If Mr. Lowe if he gets 5,000 off the load I'm carrying, more power to him, man. I'm down with that. I had a law firm, right? I paid people good, I paid people bonuses. But guess what? I made more than anybody else at the firm. Why? Because as my son used to say, he wins the cases and he gets the money, right? That's how business works. And, you know, I'm happy, and by the way, let me just put this out here publicly. I'm not looking for a shit ton of work to come my way, but if there's somebody out there, because I've gone all over the Prime lease, backwards and forwards, I've talked about it a number of times, but if you're at another company and you say, dude, what do you think of this? I'm not going to give you legal advice, but I'll tell you what Terry might do hypothetically if he was presented with a contract like you might have in your hand. My email address is always on the website or on the channel. You know, just ask me, man. I'll tell you straight up. Like Richie Rich showed his statement, and I immediately was like, well, wait a minute, you got negative escrow, and you know, a couple other things, and I was asking him about Section 11 of his contract. I'm willing to tell people what I know, right? I went to a public university. I went to a public university law school. Taxpayers funded part of my education, including taxpayers at the federal government, because I got tuition assistance and everything from the Navy. So I'm happy to share. I'm not going to hide the ball here. So I know this is a little bit long, but I hope this clears up some stuff and, you know, gets people thinking about, instead of focusing on, you know, like I went in, you know, Loves is selling fuel over there at the pumps. I'm not going to, you know, I'm going to pay it or not, but I'm not going to be all pissed that Mr. and Mrs. Love only paid $4 a gallon and I got to pay $4.75, right? Because, you know, that's what business is all about, right? And, you know, if you're in business, you got to understand, you know, you got to understand those concepts, like, and you know, and then figure out how you make more money. But it might not be from just ringing somebody else out. It might be from efficiencies or, you know, being more selective, whatever it is, right? But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate everybody. Appreciate the comments. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.